Today I'm going to show you how you can upscale your AI art to insane proportions using Topaz Gigapixel, and I'm also going to touch a little bit on Photo AI. I consider this to be an essential part of any AI art arsenal, and what you can do with it is truly amazing. So let's jump straight into it. I'm going to start off with Topaz Gigapixel, which is essentially just for upscaling, and I'm going to drag in this Midjourney image to get started. Now I do have several images off to the side that I'm going to use of different styles from Midjourney and Leonardo AI, but we're going to start off with this image of Leonardo, and you can see here we've got the name, the original size 2048 by 2048. We can upscale it by 6 to 12,288 pixels by 12,288 pixels, and we want to explore some of these settings and some of the options so you get an idea of how this works. Now I'm going to bring this down and out of the way. We have a few view modes. For one, we can click on this and simply view the original. I'll unclick that, and we can also use this slider here to compare the results in this sort of sliding fashion, which you can already see, pretty incredible. And then on the right here, we have a whole bunch of options. I mean, for one, if we wanted to, we could crop part of the image and only focus on, say, this. We can rotate. So we have a few different options for cropping if you want to do that. Just going to hit cancel. But this is where we can pick the scale, and it's where I'm going to start. So at the moment, I'll go up to 6x, but I can also go custom. A custom scale, I can go say up to 8x even or more, but anything beyond 6x is going to be using other methods other than just AI. So 6x is about the best you can run. However, there are other options as well. If you are working in print, I don't necessarily think that it's going to matter what DPI something is in print. If the resolution is high enough, whatever size you print it at, it will automatically determine the DPI from there. But if you really want to know for sure, you can go by width or height and it will scale proportionally. So if I go width and change pixels to say inches, and I want this image to be 35 inches wide, I can change the pixels per inch, which is the same as dots per inch, to 300. And again, just quickly put 35 in there. And you'll notice that at 300 DPI at 35 inches, the image is about a 5x upscale. So you can actually go that way if you want to, because remember, any time you use DPI, you need a print size associated with it. Otherwise, it's basically a meaningless metric. But ultimately, the best thing you can do is just go 6x. And I think that's going to maximize your results. So whatever way you prefer to operate there is fine. But then we move down and we have some AI models here, different models used for different purposes. And we scroll down and we have other settings associated with those models. But to start off with, standard is actually usually my favorite simply because it is the standard model. It does kind of the best across the board if you want to sort of generalize a little bit. If I move up to the face up here, you can see how good a job it's done here on the eye, especially if I use this slider. At the moment, we're not zoomed in all the way, so let's take it to 100%. Find the eye. And already you can see the difference that it's making there. And even if you go in 200%, you can see just how fleshy that looks compared to the pixels that is being fed. So it's a very powerful model. But let's take it back to about 50%. So you can see here we get this nice detailed bit of cloth, this nice texture on the skin, and we're going to check some of these out with the other images as well. But to sort of give you a bit of a rundown, standard is like the standard model. It works across the board pretty well for most images. High fidelity is actually designed for high resolution images. So especially if you've got, say, a high resolution photo and you really want to take it to the next level, that's kind of what high fidelity is good for. Low res is for small, low resolution images if you want to bump those up. Art and CG creates a cleaner sort of render. So if I go to, say, low res, you'll see us kind of smoothed it out. It doesn't have as much detail, which can be good if that's what you're after. But if I switch back to standard, we've got more detail, and I think it's a much better image. We go to art and CG, and again, we've got a cleaner sort of appearance. It's more designed for 3D or for drawings. We do have some settings down here we can adjust, but right now I'm not too concerned about that. And of course, there's also low-res version 1. Again, it's a little cleaner, but has a few inconsistencies that I think if you go from here to low-res version 2, cleans up a few of those things and makes it more consistent. Text and shapes is great if you've got signs and text on there. So this image, it still does an okay job, but it's not really what it's designed for. Lines is similar. If you've got very vertical or horizontal lines, it kind of highlights those. So it kind of highlights the outlines here in this image. Whereas if we go to recovery, which we will in a minute, that is like a next level kind of upscaler we're going to touch on soon. But first, we'll go with high fidelity, as this image was created in Midjourney and then had a creative upscale applied to it. It's already pretty decent resolution, just not high enough for large scale print. But you can see the quality in this image. You can see the texture in the mask here looks very legit. We move over from that to standard, and standard has a similar effect, but it's just not quite as neat. It's just looks a little artificial compared to high fidelity, which does a great job of smoothing that out because it works better with the details being given. And again, we can slide back and forth and see that difference. Zoom into 100%, and you can see, especially the detail in the eye, just how awesome a job it's done. And those little bits of texture on the mask look really incredible. But I'm going to zoom back out to 50. I want to show you recovery. Now, this is very much a more full-on version of the Upscaler. If I click on recovery, it says here it's not as suitable for images over 1000 by 1000 pixels, but we can still check it out and see what we get. So I click continue, and I'm going to select the eye. So we got a look at this detail on the headband and the eye itself. Now you have these cool sliders here. We've got a detail of 0. Now I can zoom in and out a bit if I want to, but I'm just going to leave it at about there. But with the detail, I can go from 0 up to full, and you can see how much detail it adds. So what's really cool about this is you can move this slider until you find the amount of detail you're after. So that's one way of really customizing the upscale you get. But because it's such a powerful upscaler, an image like this would take about 50 minutes to render, and it's also already a pretty big image. So it does give you an idea of the power of this, but we'll try it with a smaller image later on to see what results we get. I'll X out of that. So for now, I think high fidelity is going to be the best for this particular image. I'll go back to side-by-side view here, zoom in, and you can see the difference. It's pretty huge. So we can work with one image at a time, but we can also do bulk images. So there is another thing you can do also. There's a little compare box down here. If I click on that, I can pick 4 models to compare. So I can go standard, high fidelity, art and CG, and let's try low res. Click compare. I can still move the image around. You can see here we have our standard upscale, which looks pretty good. High fidelity, I think, still looks the best. It's not quite as sharp in some detail areas, but it's more consistent. Low resolution is very smooth. Art and CG, probably a little too smooth. But this is really cool because we can compare multiple models at once if we're just not sure. There's also a face recovery option, but we're not dealing with a human face here. We're going to leave that off for now. And I'm going to go cancel, come back to our high fidelity upscale over here. Now down the bottom, there are some settings. If I want to sharpen this right up, now to sort of really highlight the difference, once again, I'm going to crank this up to full. You can see the amount of sharpness it's added into this image. I'll zoom out a little bit, and it's become incredibly sharp down to the finest little detail. Now that's probably a little too sharp, I think, for an image like this, but it is cool to know you can take it there. I'm going to bring it back down. That's probably not bad, 28. Denoise, if you had a lot of noise, you can bring it down. This image is probably more, if I go off to the side over here, you can see we've got a bit of noise. Now that noise is actually still smoothed out a fair bit. Move over. You can see how excellent that edge looks. If I move the denoise up to full, it sort of takes even more of the noise out of the image. And there's other options here like fixed compression. I bring that down, and it just sort of fixes some of the weird issues that you might get. But overall, every image is going to be a little bit different. You see how smooth this eye looks. If I bring compression back down again, I think it looks a little bit more sort of grainy, has a bit more of a real world feel to it. So every image is going to be different. I recommend trying these settings. However, if you do have a lot of images of a similar style, that's where you can bulk convert pretty effectively. Now it has got face recovery turned on. Now there are no faces here apart from Leonardo's a turtle. I'm going to turn that off. And there's also gamma correction. So if you're familiar with like light gamma, you can see it sort of changes the light and shadow a little bit. It softens it up sometimes or hardens it up. You can see the difference here. When it's turned on, it's a bit softer. Turned off, and it's almost a little bit too artificial and detailed. But overall, that image looks pretty amazing. I'm going to turn gamma correction back on. And so now we have our image, and if I'm ready to save, I've got a 6x upscale. If I just drag this up, at the moment we're in inches. I'm going to just go back to width and change that to pixels so we can see we're dealing with 12,000 pixels by 12,000 pixels roughly. I go export image. I have my image here. And I can add in some prefixes to the name. So something at the start of the name. So I can say upscale, and it will add, as you can see here, upscale, and then the file name. So you can add a bit of an automated sort of like setting for the naming of the file. You can save it to the same folder or choose a different folder. You can also format it as a JPEG, PNG, or a TIFF. I just like JPEG in this instance, but I'll bring the quality up. And then I'll click save. And after about 2 minutes, at least on my computer, I can go here, open up the folder, and see my results. keep in mind your computer does this locally. It's not on a server, so that when you actually get a hold of Topaz, it doesn't send it off to a server to upscale. You do it locally in your own computer, which means there's no limit to how many you can do at one time. Now this is our image, and if I zoom in, you can see how much detail we've been able to add. Now I'm zoomed in at 1:1, and you can just see how gigantic this image is. And this is a Midjourney image with a creative upscale, and then upscale by Topaz to up to 12,000 pixels. And check out the detail. It's introduced the little pores, little skin textures, the highlights, little dots. So if you're watching this video on YouTube right now, and you're watching at 1080p, what you're seeing is a 1:1 image. Check out the detail on the cloth. It does a great job of detecting the textures and actually filling in the detail to create something really unique. Down to the nostrils, a little bit of pink around the nostrils, and even the little bit of film, the little tiny bit of grain, which gives it that authentic feel, and the little tiny hairs or bits of like thread coming off the mask. Really impressive result. Now I ran the rest of the images through, and most of them were done with high fidelity. Some of them were done with standard, but I wanted to compare and just show you what's possible with these particular images. So we have the anime image. This is the 1:1. You can see how pixelated it gets. When I turn on the upscale, it's very smooth. Very big difference, especially over here. When you look at this detail, looking very clean, and this is using high fidelity. So you can see how much has been added to this image. And if you look at the image size, it is 6,000 by 6,000 pixels, because the original was it was just a normal upscale in Midjourney, about 1024 by 1024 pixels using Niji mode. But moving on, we have the Batman image. If I zoom in, we can see the pixelation here. I turn on the upscale and it's smoothed out. Has a little bit of grain to it, looks pretty solid. Now the face, got a nice stubble here on the chin. The eyes are still missing a little bit, but overall, it's much better. We look at the original again, very pixelated, and we've got a nice upscale out of that. So you can see this is a fairly large image compared to what we used to have. It's the way it smooths out things like the ears. We've maintained a little bit of grain, which is what we wanted to give it that film kind of look. So it's turned out pretty good. Now the next image was made in Leonardo AI, not upscaled, and it was the lowest resolution image we had. So I was able to zoom in here. This is the original 1:1. You see we're quite pixelated. Turn on the upscale. Things are looking much smoother. The detail on the lips, things are softened up a bit. Some of the detail here was a little bit hard to sort of avoid, but also a little bit of that was in the image. If you look at the original, there's kind of some bits and pieces in the image. It'd be a bit difficult to work with, but easy enough to sort of fix up if you're using Photoshop or something like that. But that image has turned out quite well, and its image is now a little under 6,000 pixels. So it's a little under 6,000 pixels since it was under 1,000 pixels originally. But overall, a good image, and it has also maintained some of the focal blur from the foreground to the background. So that's done a pretty good job there also. This artwork image, if we zoom in again, this is kind of like some street art. You can see how pixelated we are in some of these edges. Turn on the upscale, 6x upscale again. It's really done a good job adding in detail, adding in texture. The way it invents texture and shape. Look at some of these shapes. They all look sort of like actual bits of paint and little bits of sort of diffusion added to there. Turn it off and it's just pixels. It does a great job of detecting what it's supposed to look like and adding that detail in, especially when you look at things like this and the way it's interpreted those dots to create actual shapes. The Stoic statue, now this is the original, doesn't look too bad. Again, we zoom in, you can see some of the pixels, and then we add the upscale, nice and smooth, and looks like a pretty solid image. And it just looks like an actual statue. It's still got that smoothness where it needs to go, and some of that sort of rougher texture where it needs to be as well. You can see how well that's turned out. So in order to get the best results, I have some tips for you, which is for one, standard and high fidelity are going to be the most versatile upscalers, but still check each image on an image by image basis and try the different upscalers if you're really looking to get the most out of your images. But also, try to upscale natively in your AI art platform as much as you can. So this means if you're in Leonardo AI, you want to use your Alchemy upscalers, you want to possibly even use the universal upscaler before coming into Topaz. And if you're in Midjourney, use a creative or subtle upscale to squeeze as much out of that image. This will give Topaz Gigapixel more detail to work with and get you a much better image. And it also means instead of going from, say, 1,000 pixels to 6,000 pixels in dimensions, we can go from more like 2,000 to 12,000. So you get even more out of that image. But back to Topaz Gigapixel, because what we're going to do is look at recovery. But before I bring that up, I just want to note that you can go show legacy models to show some of the older models that they've since upgraded in case you prefer those. But we're going to turn those off again for now and go to recovery. It's not really designed for large images, so about 1,000 by 1,000 is the max they recommend. This image is not quite 1,000 wide, but it is about 1,500 or 1,400 tall. So I'm just going to click continue, choose this part here. Now I can zoom in and out with this slider here, and even though it's not a big image, it looks like it's going to take about 16 minutes to render. But I can actually go up here where it says recovered and go to original to view the original. Now I'm actually just going to use my video editing software to move this off to one side and keep it stable. I'm going to go back to recovered. And as you can see here with the detail, if I bring it all the way to 0, it keeps it pretty soft, but still gives it a bit of a sharpen up. If I crank it up to full, it really overdoes the detail in this particular image anyway, but you can move this slider until you find the detail level that you want. In this instance, I'm going to go relatively low, about say 12, and we're going to recover full image. And now I'm going to export that image and save it in the same location, except this time I'm going to say recovery at the start of the file name, click save. And this is our recovered image. I zoom in a bit, and it's actually done a pretty good job. We still get some funny issues with the detail here, but for this particular image, I think this has been the best upscale that we've had. It's the cleanest. It hasn't added the most detail, but it definitely seems to be the most natural for this particular image. So if you're really looking to take things to the next level, try playing with recovery in Topaz Gigapixel to see what results you get. But while we're at it, I wanted to touch on Topaz Photo AI. Now, it is a step up, costs a bit more than Gigapixel, but it's still a solid program. So we have the same upscale options. I can go to 4 or to max, which is 6. We get that same slider preview if we want to check things out, and it does a pretty similar job. Now, this is using a different model. This is the low resolution model, but it has the same models like high fidelity, where you can add in the detail, you can change some of the details. Instead of sharpen, they have deblur, and you can choose any of these models much like you would with Topaz Gigapixel. But it actually has more detailed enhancements. So if I go to add enhancement here, you've got a few here. We can apply autopilot like the other one. We can preserve text. If there's any text in there, it'll help sort of use that. Remove can actually help remove objects. So if we just give that a quick test run and say we want to remove the nostrils, add enhancement, remove. I've got this brush size here, and I can just find the thing I want to remove, click on it, click again, and speed/quality will determine how much quality goes into that generation. I will bring it up a little bit, say about halfway, and you can see object selection or regular. So we can also use negative to remove, but let's just click remove selection to see how well that works. You see it's done one pretty well, but not the other, but that's it. That's okay. I'm going to undo. It's not really the strength of this program. I would recommend something like Photoshop's generative fill or maybe Canvas on Leonardo AI or another stable diffusion program. But it does have more in-depth sort of like noise removal and sharpen. For example, if I go to remove noise, you've got different models for noise removal. If I go to extreme, we can see the difference from this to extreme. Strength is up, and it's removed a lot of that noise. I put the strength down, you see how the big difference there. And there's also other things like blur or original detail. I can crank that up, try and preserve some of the detail. So if you're looking at controlling the level of detail in your upscale, this could be a great way to further change those little bits and pieces. You can also go by selection. So I can auto select all, or I can choose something like none. And I can actually just choose to denoise one area. So I go back to controls, bring that over, and it will just affect that one area. And then of course you can add multiple layers of this. I've got remove noise. I can add a second remove noise here. So you can actually go through and make edits with the AI using Topaz Photo AI into individual areas of the image. And then of course got other things like sharpen, where you've got different models for sharpen depending on what you're trying to fix. This is great for photographs as well. Different controls, and of course things like adjust the lighting. So if I get rid of some of these, we'll even get rid of the upscale for now. Let's add in adjust lighting. You can see the lighting has been adjusted. I can actually strengthen it, bring it down, so it'll actually change the lighting of a photograph or an AI art image if it's a bit too dark or too bright. And then of course on top of that, we have balance color. We can change the color balance, make it cooler or warmer. And even if we bring it up to warm, we can bring that opacity down so it has less of an impact. And on top of that, we can choose to select certain areas. So if I chose auto select and I chose background, it's selected the background. I can bring the feathering down so it's got a harder edge. And then I can go and make that background super blue, crank up that opacity. You can see here, we've managed to create a bluer background. And again, I bring the temperature to the other side. We've got a warmer background. So you can make some pretty cool adjustments there. And of course, this is because of the lighting as well. It's also a bit lighter. So if you're looking to do more direct edits to your images, Topaz Photo AI could be a great way for you to still upscale, but add those enhancements pretty easily. And there's a link to that in the description as well. But that should give you a bit of a strong indication of just what you can do with Topaz Gigapixel and Topaz Photo AI. I highly recommend if you're creating AI art and you want to do something high resolution or print with your art, you're going to have to upscale it at some point. So I recommend checking out one of these programs. There's links in the description. So I hope you enjoyed the video and found that interesting and useful. If you did, please consider giving the video a like. Otherwise, thanks for watching and we'll see you again next time. Have a great day.